Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 565. My name is Eric Nelson, and with me today, I have my regular guy, Matt Lungeth. Today is Wednesday, July 28th, 2021. Matt, how's it going?
Eric, I am well. I have just picked up my latest copy from a fellow V expert and all-around nice guy of the part 2 of the VDI design guide. And speaking of all things EUC, we have with us Adam Matthews today from VMware EUC PSO, I believe, to speak about his blog post and all things Fusion and the latest macOS. How to get that properly deployed. But before we get to all of that, sir, how are things out there on the West Coast? How's the fire situation? Is that still as prevalent as it was over the last couple of weeks? And how is the color of the bay?
Yeah, it is calm down here in the Bay Area. It is a comfortable 72 degrees, a little bit chilly. We had some chilly weather come in. Actually, it was a little humid and a little bit of rain yesterday, which is odd. Just some drips, but enough to the humidity is high, which means the fire season, that helps that out. So the air has been clean, and I don't think we've got any major fires going this week, which is also good. So always happy to have some cooler weather with a little humidity for the West Coast. And the color of the bay is just a nice choppy green. We've got a little bit of cooler weather with some wind. So, Northern California can get a little chilly sometimes, and the weather gets a little cloudier, and the water gets a little greener. So other than that, how's it out there in Pennsylvania?
You know, we have a cool front that is just started to come in today. It was very warm and humid, mid 90s, actually, Monday and Tuesday, but we're going to see overnight lows in the high 40s on Friday night and Saturday. So a little bit of a break in relief. Should be, some beautiful late July here, early August weather. I can't believe it's early August as we're sitting here and progressing along and moving through our summer episodes. But it's starting to make that little bit of a cool down for what hopefully will be a great weekend.
Well, before we jump into the news, Adam Matthews, you're over in the UK. How's the weather over there?
Surprisingly good today, actually. So, as in the UK, you may expect it to be raining and grey all the time. We actually had some sun for the first time in a while. Well, no, actually, I say that. Last week, it was nearly 100 Fahrenheit, nearly 30, 31 degrees. It was hot for a country that builds its houses to retain heat. And a nation of people who complain about pretty much everything. It's too hot, it's too cold. So, pretty awful week last week. Much better week this week.
Yeah, I got to say, when you get nice weather in the UK, it is just beautiful because you have the big leaves and the trees and the green grass already. So, but it's just usually just rainy and cold. But if you get beautiful weather, it's the best place to be. Really enjoy it, especially out in Bath and Bristol, some of those places. Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really nice. All right, before we get to the show talking about Fusion, we will just bounce through just the key dates. Content calendar for VMworld. The sessions are live. You can go read the sessions. They open July 20th, so go check that out. You can also register for VMworld. It's going to be October 5th through the 7th. We have key sessions. We've identified some key sessions. We're going to be promoting some of the key sessions going on. So Corey is asking vExperts to give us cool reasons why these sessions you think are good. So we're going to publish those key sessions. We've went through and picked some sessions, like for instance, Brian Matthews and end user computing stuff. He's doing a cool one.
Eric, I have to ask, is it VMworld season yet, or are we still in pre-season? Is this like the pre-season sale for VMworld, or are we in full hype mode from now until the event?
Well, first of all, let me correct. It's Brian Madden, not Brian Matthews. Adam Matthews with us. Brian Madden. It's got a cool one. We're going to be covering him. We are entering, as we come into August 1st now, we get into VMworld, formally the VMworld season. My team, the social media and communities team, don't go on vacation anymore. You needed to get your summer vacations done so that as you come into mid-August now, we're talking VMworld, we're talking everywhere VMworld. And then because it's a month out, we start promoting everything that's going to be happening. And we're getting getting the Slack channels all lined up. So we'll have good Slack channels where people can come into community and then drill down from community into VMUG or drill down into vExpert or VMTN. So we're getting all that stuff ready, and then we're going to start talking about it. So yeah, coming into August, we're going to be talking about kind of what we're trying to do cool for the event during October.
Yeah, and then some great guests to come and those featured sessions. I can't wait. This is always a, I joke around a little bit, right, of the hype around the event, but this is some of the most breaking news content, right, where we get a little bit of that sneak peek of some things that might be coming out, some little preview or insights. So a great time to listen and a great time for some guests to be on. Yeah,
we've reached out to a couple people. It's fun because we reached out to a couple key people that we think this would be a great session, and we're talking to him like, "Wow, that's great!" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm really excited. I finally got a session this year. I never got a session. It's code, blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Oh, that's a code session. That's great, right?" Like, so it's fun. It's fun to get everybody doing sessions. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. So I think that's it for the news. I don't think there's anything else. Go check out Content Calendar and see what sessions you're interested in. And if you're writing blogs, build us a blog article on why. We are trying to push for people to actually show up to the sessions, not just register for the sessions. And so we're going to be trying to do things that give you 3 key takeaways from that session that you would like to see, and then maybe give the session speakers, if they're interested, the ability to select somebody that could win something or some reason to actually be there, some key information that maybe he's not going to publish, or some key insight that if you're coming live, you get to see that and chat. And they'll be on Slack. So we're going to do some stuff. We'll see how that goes. Fun times. All right. With that, let's get to the show, because I really like the topic today, which is macOS Monterey in Fusion with Adam. So Adam, we always start. First, I love Mac. I run on Macs, but I've been shifting back and forth to Windows now because all the security stuff and Apple just is, and Windows are all just, it's getting harder and harder to run everything I want to run and do things. Seems like I'm doing more IT admin on my Mac systems than I are my Windows systems, which was never the case before. But maybe that's just because everybody's now targeting Mac as a platform to hack as well. But Adam, thanks for coming on the show. Always ask, who are you? How did you get what you're doing at VMware? What's your career arc look like? Give us the couple-minute elevator pitch of how you got sitting here.
Fantastic, Eric. So thank you very much for having us on today. So I'm Adam Matthews. I'm a senior solution engineer at VMware within the, I'd say, Anywhere Workspace, digital workspace team. Based in the UK. I've been at VMware for just coming up for 6 years. It's funny how you always sort of say just coming up for a big number, right? So I'm based in the UK. Obviously, I cover Northern Europe for my territory. I spent the first half of my career at VMware in post-sale. So I was an AirWatch technical account manager. So those who are aware, Workspace ONE as a solution was known in part as AirWatch. It was acquired by VMware back in 2014. So I was in supporting our enterprise customers there with their strategy, getting devices enrolled, building out new things, getting them upgraded and supporting them there. And then I took a bit of a shift into the pre-sales world, moving into actually selling the solution to customers versus supporting them after they've bought. So I've done that now for 3 years in a couple of guises. Started in the commercial team, looking after I'd say smaller companies, and then moved back into enterprise at the start of 2019 to cover the global accounts for Europe. So yeah, it's been a I'll say very fast 6 years. I am not even 10 years out of university now, so I graduated in 2013. I did a computer science degree, moved into desktop support straight out of uni. So I've been end user focused for the majority of my career. So after desktop support at a local sort of MSP, managed service provider, I moved into running IT for a consulting company based in London. So there were about 150 employees, remote sort of a shared office space, looking after the office infrastructure, the user support, everything else. And then the role at VMware came up and a role at AirWatch came up, which was obviously by VMware at the time, and fantastic way to get a job at VMware through an acquisition there. So, but yeah, so I've been excited throughout. I've taken part of our champions program in EMEA for Apple. So I look after a lot of Apple related topics, supporting our pre-sales, post-sales field with any questions. I'm also part of the vExpert program as well. So yeah, I've been on Apple for over 10 years now. There is a lot more happening on the Mac estate for sure. So we can talk about that as we go through.
Yeah, nice. I only have one question, Matt, and if you might have anything, feel free. But my question is, when you came out of uni, which I think is great because I'm Australian, right? It's obviously a British, you have a uni.
College, university,
Yeah, exactly. How long did it take you to feel comfortable like you had a career? We were talking to some guys that were, some of the new guys that are out of university, and they're like struggling around trying to figure out what they're doing with their life and how that. I look at my own self, and I felt like I came out of university when I was like 21, 22 years old, whatever it was. And it took me till I was 30 until I felt like I had a career. Just curious, since you're closer to it, what was your experience?
I would actually say that's been my path. Yeah, I am about 6 months into being 30. So yeah, I graduated when I was 22, 23. I did a year's placement. So I did a year's worth of work as part of my degree, right. Which if anyone gets the chance to do, like a placement year, an internship year during a degree, do it. It is a fantastic experience because when you come out into the workplace with a year's worth of experience, it makes your final year so easy. Especially I worked at a bank on a trading floor for a year, getting up at 6 in the morning, working till 6 in the evening, going back to uni and getting up at 10, going to lectures, so easy after that. But straight out of university, I didn't really, people say, where do you want to be in 5 years? You've got to think about a 5-year plan. I didn't have any of that. I knew what I was good at. I was good at talking to people and helping them with IT. I'm very good at boiling down complex concepts and helping people understand that maybe you don't generally. So I just kind of gravitated to what I was good at. I've always been an IT-minded person ever since I was a kid. I was replacing jumpers on motherboards on my dad's computers when I was like 6. So, it's been around for a very long time. But yeah, I would say it's not until the last couple of years at VMware that I really felt like I am in a flow. I know kind of partially where I want to go over the next few years, some things I'm doing there and working on sort of my personal brand and how I want to be perceived and everything. And yeah, that's taken a lot of work. So anyone who is fresh out of university is worried about anything, I would just say, don't worry about it. Just go with what comes to you, take opportunities when they come up. And sometimes, I remember the day before I joined AirWatch by VMware, I was really terrified because I didn't know I could do the job. Right. It's one of these things where I was like, I don't know the role that well. I've got through the interview process. It was not easy. So I figured if I'd got past that interview process, I've seen something in me that they think I can do it. But I've always got a little bit of self-doubt in there because I don't know what I'm doing here. And yeah, I got in day one, got through onboarding and really settled into that. And sometimes I still don't think I know what I'm doing, but it's always a process. But no, I would say to anyone, just take things as they come and work towards just being yourself really and listening to what you want to do and what you're good at, and don't worry what anyone else says. And if someone says, what's your 5-year plan? Just say, I don't know. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is just common because we're in all IT and we hacked on motherboards and did jumpers and that. And so we all have that experience. But I would say my experience was very similar to that. You come out of university and you're like, you think you know what you're doing, but maybe you don't. And then you do some things and some things work, some things don't. You don't feel comfortable ever until I was like maybe 30. Then I started getting comfortable with what I knew and what I could do and what I could deliver. And therefore things smoothed out. So I tell the younger people like, yeah, don't feel bad about it. It takes a bit of, we all went through this. Right. So
spot on. Absolutely.
Matt, you were always perfect, right? Everything. Just
anything but I'm lucky if I have a 5-minute plan. These people with this 5-year plan, I mean, it's seriously baked, documented, blueprinted 5-year plan. Kudos to them. I'm just not that type that, I mean, I have an idea of where you want to go and things that you want to do. Sometimes I think of how you get there needs to be a little bit more reactive than prescriptive, so to say. But that's at least how I've handled it, and I've been fortunate that it's all flushed out in the end. But what lies in the future, sometimes I think, at least for me personally, it's best not to know because it allows me a little bit more to be flexible and consider roles, opportunities, and otherwise experiences in life that I wouldn't have otherwise considered.
Yeah, and it is an arc. Yeah, and you guys are in your arc. And I would say as you come into I'm 59, turning 60, right? And as you hit that, you start having friends die, right? Which is like you realize there is a back end piece of this arc, and you start looking at all the motherboards and all the other gear you got laying around, and you start going, I should probably clean some of this up so that so you start cleaning things up and you don't have a 5-year plan now. You have like a 2-year plan that okay, I know I'm going to live for at least a couple more years, so I can clean this up, clean that up, get things in order. So with that, I will end this conversation and we will start talking about OS X, right? So there is a new OS X out, Adam, and I know that we talked about the security of Big Sur that's out now. Monterey comes out. What's the deal with Monterey? Does it get tighter? I know you created a great blog article that talks about the upgrade because it's still in beta, right? So I think it's still in beta, and you're trying to get it to run on Fusion. Why would I want to go to Monterey other than just to stay on the latest release of Apple? And what's your experience? Why don't you give us a little summary before we get into your blog article?
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, Worldwide Developers Conference this year, which was I've no idea how nearly 2 months ago. Brought with it a new release of macOS. So this is macOS 12, code named Monterey. For me, being in end-user computing and helping customers manage macOS at scale, for me, there's a lot of new things coming into this OS that's going to really help around MDM and what we're doing around this. New Safari that's coming out is going to be, I think, quite nice. It's going to take a while to get used to. But mostly for macOS, it's going to be, there's a lot more stuff in the user application. So FaceTime has got more updates. You've got support for the new M1 devices, which are going to be lightning fast, and we'll talk about M1 in a little bit, I'm sure. So yeah, it's currently in private beta. So I don't think the public beta has been released yet. I've been a bit out of keeping track of when the public one comes out because I'm just on it from day one now. But yeah, so there's a lot of things coming out. The notes are improved, and I think it's macOS really starting to morph more towards the sort of iPad OS, iOS side. The device is going to start feeling less like a desktop and more like a tablet in some respects. So yeah, I'm really excited about the new release there. I'm happy that we get away from the initials of Big Sur as well into a Monterey. So it's good to see something new come along. And I would say, apologize if I do have any weather coming in. Lo and behold, it was glorious sun when we started recording. It's now thunderstorming and hailstones. So I'll go on mute in between talking.
Well, that's I expected in the UK. You can have beautiful weather, but you're only going to get beautiful weather in the UK for like 18 minutes max, right? But that's still worth it.
Pretty much.
Yeah. All right. So new OS, that is good to call out the developer conference, and that's when they dropped it. So everybody gets exposed to that, and they gave you some exposure to what it's looking like. And there's a laundry list probably somewhere of what's actually out there that's worth doing to go get that. And I know we had Michael Roy on the show a bit ago, and we talked a little bit about they're trying to get to M1. Matt, do we want to drift to the M1 conversation?
Yeah, let's talk about this, right? So with this newest release, right, not only have we seen within the last year now Apple switching over from Intel chips to their own processors, but then the architecture underneath is now moving from x86 over to ARM. Now, with this, we can call, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that this next release of Monterey will be a little bit of that swing, if you will. I think of back in the OS 9 to 10 days where we had a transitional period from code base over, where we're going to have a little bit of dual compatibility until we get the entire fleet flipped over. But as far as where we're at right now with this particular article and being able to, one, run Fusion and then emulate the macOS, the article is limited right now to, one, we need to have an Intel Mac running the x86 compiled version of Fusion that then would use the executable code base that it would be the Intel binaries for Monterey. So
Yeah.
let's look at it from the hardware level up, right? So Intel Mac with the Fusion build for x86, then
Correct.
the x86 build of Monterey. Now, from some of our previous episodes that we've had out there with Michael Roy, we know that it is publicly available information that the Fusion team is working to take some of what we have done with the ESX on ARM and spin off that code to build out a new variant for a native ARM compiled Fusion that would then allow you to run native ARM executables. He has not publicly stated whether how that will go to support what will be the native ARM builds of Monterey, but for SUSE Linux and other native ARM technologies that we have out there, we do know that will be compatible. But that's a long way of saying we need an Intel Mac with the Intel build of Fusion with the x86 build of Monterey for all of this to apply as of yet. And Adam, I'll let you chime in on all of this.
Absolutely, yeah. That's it's definitely a transition for every software vendor at the moment to get to supporting a universal app. So if you are an application vendor, not only now do you have to move from kernel extensions to system extensions pretty fast, you've also got to then support universal application. So VMware's just launched its Workspace ONE Intelligent Hub for macOS as a universal application that's supported as of 2105. So that's now not requiring Rosetta 2, which is the translation engine to run when you do this. The great thing there is when you do then run your Intelligent Hub on an M1 chip, it can then run all of the commands and pull back, CPU architecture information of Apple Silicon versus running in its little container that the macOS will spin out for it. So yeah, there's been a lot of work going to do that. And again, that moves over to Fusion as well. I see a lot of comments in the communities that we work with. I co-host, I should say, a monthly forum of Apple users who use VMware technology. So we call it VMware Apple User Group. And every month there's when we're getting my M1 Fusion build. It's like it's in the works. If I could kick it along further, I would, but that's Michael's position. So
what's going into that build?
Yeah, a lot going into that. I have no idea what, but there's a lot of effort going into that. But yeah, so no, that's a lot of feedback there, which is nice.
Right. Okay, we're moving on to your blog. Your blog is blog.eucse.com. We'll do the 1 minute. How long have you been running the blog? And what are you covering? Obviously, EUC topics, I assume.
Absolutely. So pretty much what it says in the tin. Back in October 2018, this was just before VMworld Europe, me and two of my colleagues, so Joe McDonald and Charlie Hodge. Joe is a senior solution engineer in EUC like myself, and Charlie is a solution engineer now at Okta. We came together, we were on the same team at the time, and we wanted somewhere to host our blog posts and ideas, because what was happening is we were getting a lot of repeated questions from customers, from colleagues, from partners. And what we started to do was just blog these out. So instead of having to sort of keep repeating ourselves or do anything else, we thought, there's a lot of content here. We're coming up with a lot of ways to do things. Let's share this out. So, selfishly, it meant we could just send a link to something and it would save us time. But also it does, help give back to the community, help, allow people to see things differently and to work on challenges. So we've been running that jointly now for coming up for 3 years. We've been getting steady growth on it month to month. We've invited other people in to blog as well. So my boss has written posts, and people who are now partners have written posts on there, loosely around the EUC Workspace ONE, but not typically limited to. We've covered a lot of stuff on Okta, some stuff on Azure AD as well. So yeah, we've done a lot of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up a good point, which is that in the older days, maybe like 7 years ago, whatever, corporations had places that you would publish things, right? And you go to the website, or they'd create community sites or whatever. But now it's actually just easier to spin up a WordPress instance somewhere and just create a URL for it with a domain, and then you can just publish solutions and just publish information much quicker than trying to get it all the way back through the stack. And now we've got blogs.vmware.com that it show customers all the blogs that are out there. We have search in that, so you can search topics, so that it's actually almost like a corporate publishing system that we've handed to end users or end employees to publish directly.
Absolutely, and the blogs.vmware platform is fantastic. I've helped work on a couple of posts on there in the past on the UC side, and just the fact that the team is so willing to reach out to employees, to partners and customers to actually help build content there is fantastic, because it's all about community. We don't do any of this in a vacuum. I certainly didn't build this blog post in a vacuum, and we can go through some of the co-collaborators and some of the influencers on that one for sure.
I did love the blog, and we'll get into it now. I posted in the chat on YouTube and VMware corporate YouTube channels. It's blog.eucse.com/how to run Mac Monterey 12 beta in VMware Fusion. So you can just go Google that and probably find it. But that article, you did a really nice job of giving credit to people. It was clearly a long project, right? It wasn't like I did this in 30 minutes, right? This even, I'm sure it took you a long time to write the blog, but just reading the blog and figuring out what I would have to go do, it felt like for me, this was going to be like a weekend project. And if I was lucky at the end of the weekend, this would all work, and I would have the new OS running. Right?
Absolutely. And if we add up all the time spent by all of the people who put time into trying to get this to work, I'd say it probably was a full weekend, if not more, of people trying to work on this. So I think it was on the Tuesday, Apple launched the beta. I think it was a Tuesday, Wednesday. And my thought was, I'm going to get questions from my colleagues and customers, and I personally need to test that Workspace ONE works on Monterey. So personally, I want to get access to this straight away. Go and enroll it in Workspace ONE, make sure it reflects the correct stuff, the profiles work, the scripts work, all of the stuff that we're used to in Workspace ONE for managing Macs all works. Fortunately, it was really smooth when we came in. Everything worked as expected. There was a couple of things as you'd expect, but that's good. But in my usual process, I follow a blog by Frederick Ablus, who works for Jamf, the Traveling Tech Guy blog. And he's got a really good process to build a VM, and I use this to run Big Sur today. To build yourself Big Sur VM, build the ISO, and then run it in Fusion. So I took some inspiration from there to build the Monterey ISO file. I had to work on reducing the file size because it didn't need 17 gig, it's only 13 gig. So there are lots of little things that have been trial and error. I just thought, if I can document these out, fantastic. And typically I run a OneNote folder and with, I call it tech, and I've just got loads of different notebooks for everything. I've got a macOS one. Whenever I'm doing any testing or work like this, I'll just, all my thoughts, all of my clips, code snippets, URLs just get bundled into these notes so that I know where I am. So typically a blog post will form up in these notes, and then I'll just take them and start to align it. But as we got through the process of getting a VM built, when you run the ISO first and it doesn't work, here we go. There's going to be some trial and error going on here to get things to work. And fortunately, there's a few Slack channels internally, just a couple of Slack channels in the VMware Slack, not that many, a few thousand at least. But in the Fusion one, there was a good discussion on how to run this. And there was a few people. So Scott Knight, who's one of the Carbon Black R&D guys, was working on this, who did a great job at building out those graphics fixes, because that was one of the things that was stumping me at the end, was why is it just hanging and not doing anything. And one of the colleagues on my team, Howard Bliss, who's a lead SE in the EC GAM team, spent many hours trial and erroring stuff as well. So we were going back and forth trying to figure what works, what doesn't work. So yeah, really just collaborating with people and seeing that it's taking some effort. And if it's taking effort for us who work for VMware, work in EC, work with Mac all the time, then people that maybe aren't as experienced are going to have a bit of a trouble getting this done if they want to test it or show it. So going through and trying to build a step-by-step, simple as possible blog was, I thought, really important. But also timing was of the essence as well. We launched this on the, I think it was the 9th of June. So I think it was the day after or 2 days after Monterey private beta launched. And I put it in dynamic signal, shared that on my LinkedIn and Twitter, and it just absolutely exploded. I think we got 600-700 hits in the first day. I think we had nearly 2,000 in the first 4 or 5 days after it, and that was unheard of for our blog. We get like 300 or 400 hits for a post in a month. But this was absolutely insane. So I was onto something when it came to pulling this out. But yeah, big joint effort, and I get what you mean when you go through it, and if you just sort of scan through it, like, oh my god, there's a lot here. But yeah, it's all stuff that was trial and error.
Yeah, and I wanted to just call out a couple of things just for people that I think it sounds like, it looks like it's worth doing, but it seems like one key element is that don't reboot, right? Or, you have to follow the instructions exactly. There are like 4 different places where it says, now don't do this, right? Like the natural is to click the next button, and you're like, stop, don't do this now. And there were like 4 or 5 of those instances where you're like, stop, don't do what you think you have to do, because you have to go fix these other things before you hit the next button.
And all of those do not do thises are built out of doing them first and then spending hours pulling your hair out and many beers later. So it's like whenever we do this, and there's like an unintuitive stop trying to call that out. And I think that's more important in some cases than actually the rest of it. It's knowing when not to move forward, when to take a little step, and to sort of do a little sidestep around something is really important. Yeah, there was a few of those in this.
Adam, going back to Frederick's blog, why is it that the native installer will not, complete or finish as the package sits as the native download? Why are the tweaks that you call out in the blog article required for the base? Obviously there's tweaks that we have to do once the package is installed over to, the VMDKs and you have your own VM running. But now we're taking the native installation media and making a little bit of tweaks there using some OS X utilities. So why do those tweaks have to occur?
That's a very good question. The main reason for doing this is to build yourself an ISO. And the reason you want to build an ISO is it's more portable. I find that trying to copy and move around the installer file, which is basically just a folder, is nigh on impossible if you want to do that between a VM and your native machine. So on my VMware corporate Mac, I can't use beta software, so I always have to use a VM running Big Sur to download the betas. To get that beta installer out of that VM with a shared folder is absolutely impossible. Every time you copy it, it will fail and everything else. So the best way is to just bundle that all together into an ISO file.
So this is just
and there is
a fairly substantial ISO creation process.
Yeah, it takes all in all I'd say about 5-10 minutes to go through it in terms of process. It looks scary with lots of different commands, but typically you just run them and they work. But the most important one is this create install media command that sits within the Mac installer. So the Mac installer package itself has got a command line utility that builds an installer for you. So it creates a CDR file, DMG file, which you can then double click and run to install. So macOS does have its own little way to build these installers for you, and we're just using that process to build an ISO file that you can then copy, paste, and move around.
A bit of an end around question, but if you would want to make an ISO on, let's say you download this on, you're a Windows user or another platform's user where you're trying to deploy out this VM and you don't have access to these utilities to build out that initial ISO, must you use a Mac to create the ISO to begin with?
If your starting point is pretty much nothing, then yeah, you'll need a Mac. You'll need a Mac first to, if you say you download the, you manage to get a URL that can download the installer, that's going to download something that Windows just goes, I have no idea what to do with this. It's going to just be a bunch of files in a folder, and you're not going to really get anywhere with it, even with Workstation. So that's another reason why you'd maybe want to, and obviously I'm not going to condone running macOS on a Windows machine against the EULA of macOS officially. Yeah, so in order to make that happen, you would need a Mac to start with. So that's a bit of a challenge there. There are probably ways around it. I've not gone too far down that way of trying to figure those out. But
no,
yeah,
obviously,
you would
once
need
the
a Mac to
ISO is
run those.
compiled, and if you have another source or means to get the ISO, then
Absolutely,
you're on your way.
Yeah.
But if we're following the letter of the law and we're downloading things from the official beta source, and you're compiling the ISO on your own, it seems as such right now that we would need to start off of a OS.
Yeah,
What at
you
least
can then use that
would
ISO.
we need to start with Big Sur for these commands, or could we be back at a version back?
This could be way back. This could probably be 10, 12, I would say, probably. I think you could go way back to run this for sure. And what you would typically do if you didn't want to actually run it locally is you'd set the beta profile up on your Mac, download the installer file, and then go from there. That's probably the easiest way to do it. There are other command line ways to pull the installers. There's a couple of packages that have been built by the Mac community to some Python scripts basically that go off to certain areas on the Apple CDN and pull down the files.
Right, if you're doing like an enterprise deployment or whatnot, sure.
Absolutely, yeah. But you can also take this ISO that you've packaged here and bundle that onto a USB stick, plug it into your ESX box, for example, and then run yourself a VM in your lab, which I used to do on my little Nook lab that I've got. But there's a couple of things that I wanted to use with a VM that Apple do prevent you running on a VM, like content caching has to be running on a native Apple hardware, which was frustrating. So yeah, you can also run that VM on your ESX box if you did want to.
So moving along, once we have that ISO developed, it seems like there is a couple of other tweaks out there. As Eric had mentioned, like with the moving over from the E1000 driver over to VMX Net 3 and whatnot. What else out there needs to be tweaked a little bit before we have relatively full functionality?
Yeah, so that was I would say the main thing. That's where the first "do not do something" comes in. Was around once you've built the VM through the wizard and you've set your virtual machine up and you've set the networking adapter, is to set the VMX settings. And one of the comments in the blog post mentioned that the step 2 that I put together here was not really required. And I'm so used to doing this now because I enroll every single VM I run. Either I run it through an automated enrollment through Apple Business Manager, or I manually enroll it. And the reason I do some of these options here, so the board ID, reflect host false, and change the board ID and the hardware model, is so that when we're enrolling this in MDM, the correct hardware information is passed back to the MDM solution. Otherwise, it's just going to send you back VMware Inc. pretty much for the hardware model, and it's probably going to enroll it incorrectly. Typically, Workspace ONE UEM would enroll it as an iPhone, which isn't really going to help you out.
System tags are going to come off when you do your initial enrollment, right? And it's going to
Correct.
be the wrong UEM profiles, and then you're re-enrolling it all over to begin with. So for those who are testing the UEM functionality or your other MDM solution of choice, this is an important step to all of that.
Completely. I should probably amend this and pop this Ethernet piece up the top, to be fair. But the other piece with serial number.
Yeah. Hey,
so
Adam,
yeah.
Let me say to all our listeners, if you're listening on podcast, which is TalkShoe, and you're downloading the MP3, you're not going to get to see the blog article that we're scrolling through. So you can go to his blog article and listen to this and check it out. We're just looking through the steps. Or if you're listening to on YouTube, we're sharing his actual blog in one of the screens now, which is why we're talking through as if we're looking at something, because on YouTube, vBarbecue, we are actually live streaming the actual blog article itself. But you can go to the blog article and take a look. We're in step 2. In the bottom section is step 2. So just catching everybody up. And if not, you can just listen to it and then go back and look at it if you want to. So continue on here, Adam, with the last very important step in step 2.
Absolutely. No, fantastic clarification there. So yeah, the Ethernet piece, we, through a lot of trial and error, realized that the networking doesn't work if you use the default NIC type in Fusion, which still is E1000E. we've had VMX Net 3 for a long time now, and I think there was some discussion in some chats around why on earth this isn't default already. But the second we went to VMX Net 3, we were able to get the networking correctly working on the Mac, and we could go through Setup Assistant. Without that, Setup Assistant wouldn't pass correctly. You'd get stuck on the network setup piece. And a macOS device always has to hit the network pretty much before it sets up so that it can do some sort of calling back to base. But yeah, once you've done that, you can boot through. You'll go through the installer, Setup Assistant as you will. Now, there's a good step that we do here. Once we've installed macOS, is we take a snapshot before we do anything. What this allows us to do is very easily go back to the beginning before Setup Assistant, maybe change a serial number over. We'll redo the process if we're doing some new testing, so it's always good to do that. Have a little snapshot for you there. And then the other piece that was a lot of trial and error, and Howard was very fundamental in finding out, was around automatic login. So there is a bit of a challenge at the moment in when we were doing this with if you ever hit the login window. So whenever you're on a Mac OS and you see a page to type in your password, that's called login window, all one word, within the Mac OS system. And that wasn't rendering correctly in Fusion. So you would basically get stuck there. You would have a little spinning wheel forever. And part of the trial and error steps were just leave it for 6 hours and it will pass. I was like, no, I'm not leaving anything for 6 hours. That's not part of what I'm going to do. So the thought there was if we can then bypass login window with
I sometimes try that with my inbox, but it has the same effect.
I've been there as well, for sure.
So can you bypass the login window if you have like 5 different logins on your Mac? Can you just go in and say set to one and go in, or once you have multiple users, you can't?
Yeah, once you got multiple users, it becomes tricky. Yep. But yeah, so for here, it's only recommended for testing.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Got it. So if you got it in a VM, it's not your regular Mac, you don't have any problem with this. You just go set it because you're not going to have multiple users running anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're running a physical machine, so if you're doing testing on a physical Intel or M1 machine, you're not going to have this challenge.
Yep.
This is purely when you're running it virtualized. Yeah. So what I also try and do on my blogs is try and throw in some troubleshooting because typically I'll go through Pain. I'll have screenshots in my OneNote folder. I'll try and provide you these because typically you might miss a step, you might see this, and then suddenly, oh, I see that, and I saw this, so now you know where to fix it. So yeah, the internet connection screen here. So if you see an error with internet connection in Setup Assistant, you haven't set the VMX Net 3 NIC correctly, or if you did set it, you maybe didn't set it correctly. If you see this fuzzy screen, then typically you need to go and do Scott's amendments around graphics piece. But then we've also got one very IT way to get around this is if you do have a fuzzy screen in Fusion when you boot the thing, just restart it a few times. It will clear. Why that's the case, I have no idea. Why rebooting anything in the IT world works, no one knows. It just does. So yeah, so that's that. So it's a relatively long post, but it does go through a lot of different things that you need, and there's also some things there that are useful when running Big Sur and also running other bits and pieces as well. So
yeah, excellent, very complete blog, and I would say definitely read the whole thing one time through before you even start, because I think that there's you're right, you could go back and sequence some of it, but on the other hand, it's only like maybe a 87 page blog. You just go read the whole blog, and that gives you a nice cheat sheet to go through. And my guess is that given that you have this blog now, it should only take you an hour or two to get through it, right? Like by the time now that you got everything laid out and what to do in what order, you should be able to get up and running no problem, other than the ISO
absolutely.
image. Getting that, maybe that takes a little bit of time just to get that over. And
downloading and creating your ISO will take the longest, not just downloading it, because it is a 13 gig file pretty much. So yeah, that will take a while.
You know what would take me the longest? I'll give you one guess, like, because I'm a very cluttered person. what's going to take me the longest is finding enough disk space that I can actually download a 15 gig ISO image, then then plus do the operating system install, which is going to take you another 13 gig. Plus you're going to need 100 gig by the time you're done with that. So just finding the 80 gig I would need to be able to go set that up and run it is going to take the longest of anything.
For sure. That was one of the reasons why I did the thing I've never done on a Mac, and I actually flattened my work Mac and rebuilt it. So it's something I'm very used to doing on Windows, right? Every year or two, you'd basically get to the point where, there's no amount of cleaning I can do on this machine that's going to repair it. You have to just flatten it back to normal. I did that on my Mac for the first time, just before Worldwide Developer Conference, for the pure reason of cleaning out all the rubbish, finding enough disk space to do the testing I needed to do the following week. So
when you say flatten, what do you mean? Do you just doing like a fresh, back everything up to a fresh install and move things in?
Completely. Yep. Take the files that were mine off of it, make sure everything's synced into OneDrive, the way IT at VMware would like us to, and then just completely destroy it. Go back to a fresh image, and then what I do first of all is re-enroll it in Workspace ONE UEM in the VMware production environment, and then literally everything that I need comes back down. So I haven't really got to spend any time thinking about the apps that I used. I know that what I need will come down there. The certificates will come back for my authentication and everything else. It's just all that stuff that I hadn't quite figured out, like all of the little shell scripts that I'd built that I'd forgotten to copy and everything else. So all the little bits that you forget until after you've destroyed the machine.
That sounds like HELL for me. I would lose so much doing that. Like I've got stuff from years ago that I rely on that I've forgotten that I can't. No, I have to just keep upgrading to bigger hard drives, right? Like, and this is the problem with SSDs. They got smaller, and like that whole trick didn't work anymore. It's like, yeah. Anyway,
Adam, in some ways, it forces you to check on what you have backed up, right? When you go through a process like that, what's running locally? What do you think's out in your cloud storage provider, whether that's your OneDrive, Google Drive, whatever you're using to sync off of, whether that's spinning or SSDs, and that if you would have that catastrophic event, right, where you lose everything, that what's backed up and what's not, because you're basically going through the entire process anyway. But this is at your own pace. And hopefully you've made another copy of above and beyond if you need to recover, rather than just if you would have an unfortunate event, being forced to go through the process at your own peril. I kind of like the idea that it's a DR test. It's a personal DR test, right?
Absolutely. It's a good bit of spring cleaning as well, because I'd had like 2.5, nearly 3 years worth of stuff I downloaded and files for work and Excel sheets and reports all over the place. I just went Control Alt delete all that, and then worked out that my backups were a little bit out of date. So it is a very good thing to do, and I would probably say I might do that once every couple of years now, or at least whenever I get a new Mac. Don't restore that Mac from backup. Do it properly. Make sure you've fitted everything in and everything there. So yeah. When
it
I
shows the power
of
UEM, right? And what we have with where we, consume our own software as internal employees, that's just available out there with any other public deployment, where it's one piece of that UEM client that's out there for Workspace ONE, and everything else is pushed down in a relatively quick manner and staged and ready to go, and there's your deployment, and no needing to find individual packages and securities and certificates and bookmarks and whatnot. That device in many ways is ubiquitous to what is the assigned user roles and applications, which is really the power of the anywhere workspace ecosystem.
Couldn't have said that any better myself. Like just before, just after lockdown, actually last year in the UK, so it's the end of March, my monitor, my screen on my work Mac actually broke, so I couldn't use it. So I had to plug it into screens, and then I couldn't have it. Couldn't use it away from my desk. So I had my old Mac sitting around. That is a 2015 MacBook Pro. It still works, still good. I can change some stuff on it, but not much. But yeah, I just enrolled that into Workspace ONE as a BYOD device, and again, I had my certs on there, and I had a device I could use. It's just yeah, it's fantastic. And then, whenever I didn't have anything, it was all just into Horizon VDI sorted. But yeah, that's fantastic. I love it.
So one final question as we run up to the end of the hour here. I think we have 10 more minutes left, or maybe 5 with you, and then a barbecue report. I see Corey's waiting in the wings. Question for you: OS X 12. What's your favorite feature so far?
Wow. Do you know what?
Or whatever you want. I don't want to put you on the spot, but yeah.
Do you know what? I don't actually have one yet, because I've only used it in a VM, and I've only used it properly in sort of testing that our software works on it. I've not had that much time to really get to grips with it. I'm looking forward to running it on my proper Mac. So I'm going to take my personal Mac, upgrade it to Monterey before it goes out, and test it there. And then I get to actually use it as a personal user for a while, get to grips with all of iCloud Plus and some of the new privacy stuff, all the maps and everything. So the maps are improved on Mac now, which is nice. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of those features and just making sure they work. And I really want to test universal control, because universal control will allow you to have your iPad Pro, your Mac, and everything else. You can drag files between them. That's almost like AirDrop but seamless. I have no idea how that's going to look. I've not been able to test that yet, but I'm excited to get my iPad Pro hooked up to a Mac and then to be able to copy files and stuff between them, because I tried to use my iPad Pro as a daily driver for a while, and still not quite there with it, in my opinion. For traveling, when we finally can travel back out of the house and start meeting customers again and working, then absolutely I'm out with my iPad Pro only. But yeah, universal control is going to be a big one for sure.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Right, I run into that with multiple Macs in my world, right, and then iPad and then iPhone, and it's like it seems like I'm shifting files around on an SD card, right, just to kind of keep moving around, right? Like it's like I'll just use an SD card. I got that. So that's neat. That's it. Well, okay. So anything else, Matt, before we shift to Corey and Tony Foster for V Barbecue? I think we have a couple more minutes, and you can ask the typical questions that we do at the end of the show.
Adam, we could probably go down a rabbit hole with this, but one of the big improvements that you brought up right off the start, and being that Workspace ONE and specialist and with all of your AirWatch experience, what's out there that you're excited for as it comes to the new MDM capabilities that we're going to see with Monterey that really has got you excited?
Well, the first piece for MDM on Apple, so Apple is making a big shift to what they're calling declarative MDM, which, to not go down a big rabbit hole on this, is allowing you to define
sync, right? Sure.
Absolutely. So to define a set of objects and a set of policies and then reference each other. Because at the moment, if we want to deploy certificates, we've got to deploy them multiple times typically in each profile. Whereas with declarative, which you're starting with user-enrolled iOS, that will move into the rest of the ecosystem, which is in addition to the original MDM spec. So there's no additional issues there. It can be adopted as fast or as slow as we need to. But being able to reference certain things and deploy a certificate once and have multiple policies reference it, deploy configurations, that is going to be huge for MDM and scale. I think what Apple's doing is preparing the ecosystem for scale. I think they've seen over the past year there's been like 8 to 10% increase in enterprise use of macOS. I think they're laying the groundwork for iPadOS, iOS, and macOS, and in some ways tvOS as well, to really start to edge further as the years go on, especially with the price points of the M1 Max. When they announced the prices of these things, I was absolutely shocked that they were, under $1,000 pretty much for some of these in some respects. And they're lightning fast. So I think they're really, really getting the groundwork laid there. So that's what I'm excited for, is an expansion and a bit of a growth of macOS and enterprise over the coming 18 months, I'd say.
I think it will most certainly set them up for what has been some serious growth with everything that we've seen through with the pandemic, with BYOD, and now they're making changes within their internal builds to support what was somewhat of a little bit lacking over there on the enterprise class. There was some definitely, let's say, gotchas and workarounds, and we're going to see some large improvements with Monterey. So exciting changes to come. Eric, back to you, sir.
All right. Well, I always ask Adam, are you on Twitter? What's your Twitter handle? And are you going to do anything at VMworld? Do you have a session or anything that you're going to be talking through? And if not, no worries. Just we always wrap up with Twitter handle. And what are you doing the rest of the year?
Excellent. I'm at Adam P. Matthews on Twitter, relatively active. I may be having a session at VMworld this year. That's still TBC. But yeah, for the rest of the year, I'm focusing on ensuring the VMware Apple user group is supported and grows. We've got about 40 people on that monthly now, and making sure that the community around Workspace ONE and Apple continues to go from strength to strength. And hopefully, I can actually go and meet people in person before the end of the year. That's my one of my goals there.
I'm hoping for that. I am definitely hoping for that. Okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll say goodbye in a second. But we got the V Barbecue report coming up because it is lunchtime in California, and we are at V Barbecue on YouTube, so you can go see our YouTube channel. And I think we're going to have Corey Romero join here in a second if we can get him in here. Hey, Corey, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you? Yeah, barbecue time. I am actually hungry. It's 2:00 here in Utah, so I'm a little bit late for lunch. But yeah, as far as barbecue goes, this weekend we've got a good friend who's pregnant. We're having a baby shower, and so I'm doing pork belly. And so what I do is I take an entire slab of pork belly and I cross cut it on both sides, so it almost looks like little diamonds all the way across. And I smoke it for about 4 to 5 hours. And then I turn up the heat, get it a little bit crispy, and then I cut it into the little tiny chunks, and then you put it into a frying pan, and they come out with like pork belly is bacon, right? And so you come out with these really crispy and internal tender chunks of bacon, which are absolutely delicious. And the seasoning that I use is Daddy B's sweet chipotle seasoning, and it is the best seasoning I've ever used for pork belly as well as chicken.
Nice, very nice. That sounds great. It's like
It's very good.
You argue for the tips of the meat always, but you're taking the whole thing and put it in a frying pan and making them all tips.
Yeah, making them all tips, exactly.
So we got Tony Foster on the call too, and he's out in Kansas, and it is barbecue time in Kansas at the county fairs. Tony Foster, are you around?
It is, and yes, I am around. I've been going out to a lot of county fairs here in Kansas, and when you go to a county fair in Kansas, of course, you're going to have barbecue. Probably the biggest thing for me is the pork burgers that are prepared by the local pork producers. They're absolutely awesome. I know it ties right in there with what Corey's talking about. And of course, you've got ribs, beef ribs, pork ribs, you name it. They've got it. So that's absolutely wonderful. And then I know, Eric, a big thing for you is barbecued corn. Loads of barbecued corn this time of year, especially at the county fairs.
Well, I did learn a lesson about barbecued corn here because I did put in a cornfield this year, and I got like 80 ears of corn, and I learned that the corn is really great for the first week, right? Like, oh, amazing. You pull it off peel it and just put it in, barbecue it on the barbecue or just boil it, whatever. The second week, it's still pretty good. But by the third week, because, we have, 80 ears of corn, we don't eat that much every time, but like it starts getting mealy, right? After about the third or fourth week. So corn only has a shelf life from the crop to the table of maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks before it's no longer really good, yummy corn anymore. And then it starts being something you'd want to feed to the cows, I guess, right? So that was my lesson. And indeed. And then Adam, you're not getting off the hook. I know you're in the UK, and whatever barbecue you have to do, it must be underground, right? Like you get the V barbecue underground because you got to stay out of the rain. You guys do anything with barbecue over there? And if so, what is your favorite?
Oh my goodness! So the traditional British barbecue is typically under an umbrella out in the rain, or just that one day a year where it's hot enough to do that. And traditionally, it's just burgers, chicken wings. You get your sausages on there. We're not overly ambitious there, but
I think that there's an opportunity to start a pub that just does indoor barbecue, right? And you get fish and chips barbecue style with a pint of beer. Absolutely. So I've got a very good friend and colleague, Stavros Harlambos, who works in the customer success org, and he is a
very proud Cypriot. He makes the best souvlaki, and whenever he says we're having a barbecue, it's like, okay, I'm definitely coming. There's no question about it. Rain, sleet, snow. We've had barbecues on his garden like January 1st. It's raining, it's cold. We've got a gazebo up. We've got the fire going. We've got the little, turning barbecue, spinning the souvlaki. Oh, it is just divine. So yeah, it's I say a lot of trialing that. So, and I must say, hearing Corey talk of the pork belly there is making me long for the trips I was taking a couple of years ago before COVID to Dallas quite frequently. The barbecue in Dallas is, oh man.
Oh yeah, it's almost as good as California, but not quite. Right, but
there you go. Absolutely, yeah. It's nowhere near. I go to a barbecue place in the UK. You cannot.
Adam, I can relate with your waiting in the rain. And my oldest son, he's 21. I've cooked him ribs since he was 5 years old every November. So I've been, standing out in pouring rain sometimes, thunder, lightning, and I always cook him ribs every November.
Fantastic. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, guys, we're at the top of the hour. Thanks a lot for staying with us all the way till the end. Go over to youtube.com/vbarbecue. Give us a like and a follow if you want to. And that would be great. And we'll be back again next week. Thank you to Julia Klaus for reaching out to Adam and others and getting everybody booked and scheduled. So thanks a lot. Yay, Julia. And we'll be back again next week. Matt, good to see you. Talk to you guys all later.
Thank you
very much. Have a good day.